Hola, and welcome back to the Life Podcast, where we learn, inspire, flourish, and evolve together on the journey to our best, most authentic selves. I'm your host, Dr. C. Today, I'm so excited to be joined by Tim Shurr. We're going to be talking about the one belief away method and subconscious reprogramming. And we are going to be looking at it through multiple lenses of wellness: emotional, intellectual, occupational, and financial wellness. Tim Shurr is a mind architect for numerous top achieving business owners, executives, and entrepreneurs. He's written 7 books, including his bestseller, One Belief Away. In my research into organizational burnout, I found that high performers often hit a ceiling, not because of a lack of skill, but because of the invisible internal scripts. Today's guest has spent over 3 decades helping people rewrite those scripts. With 36 years of experience, Tim is the go-to coach when you feel stuck and you want to take your results to the next level. Tim Shurr's expertise centers on executive mind coaching, subconscious reprogramming, one belief away method, and eliminating limited beliefs to achieve peak performance, specifically targeting issues like anxiety, self-doubt, procrastination, and low productivity in sales. Hola, Tim, and welcome to the Live Podcast.
Hola, Dr. C. It's great to be here.
It's great to have you here. I'm so excited to talk about the one belief away method. So Let's level set for our listeners and tell us about your work.
So I've been looking for the cure for self-sabotage, for insecurity, for anxiety, for how to get over past trauma. I had a counselor tell me when I was 19 that I had generalized anxiety disorder. And I'm like, well, how do I get general confidence in order? And he didn't really have an answer for me. So I've spent 36 years looking for that answer, and I found it. And so I'm excited to share what I've learned after facilitating over 16,000 sessions, walking around in people's unconscious minds, trying to find the answer so that we can have a sense of peace and love and joy within, and also achieve what people might think of as impossible goals. And I've seen people accomplish them time after time in their money, with their health, with their relationships. So I'm excited to talk with you about it today.
That sounds amazing. And it sounds like a lot of hope is what I'm hearing. There is hope after all. We can work through these things.
Incredible amounts of hope, yes.
Absolutely. So we often talk about mindset in leadership, but you take it deeper into a subconscious level. Can you define subconscious reprogramming as if you were explaining it to a friend?
Yeah. So imagine that your mind is like a garden, and every garden has flowers and weeds. And, we want more flowers, but we have a lot of weeds. And so we have mental weeds that are in our human operating system that we pick up from going through what I call big T and little t traumas in life. So little t traumas in childhood are like being rejected, not getting picked to be on the team, getting embarrassed in 3rd grade, standing in front of the class, right? Things like that, where we feel embarrassed or humiliated or rejected. And then we have the big T traumas, right? The abuses that people go through, the illnesses, the deaths, the big moves, the things that rattle us. And so when we go through those experiences, our brain is always trying to make sense of everything. And it starts to form these beliefs, about what it thinks those experiences mean. And those beliefs are like rules that are in our mind, in our unconscious mind, in the part of our brain that's kind of unconscious that we're not really aware of, because our brain makes up these beliefs without our knowing it, and often definitely without our permission and without our consent, or input even. And so because most of our beliefs are formed by the time we're 10 years old. So we have these beliefs that are guiding us. And when we realize that our life isn't the way that we want, we try to figure it out with personal development, or we go to therapy and we talk about our problems, but that's like cutting the top off of those weeds. And so we can talk about them, but it just seems like they don't go away, or we get some progress, but then we relapse. So then we turn to either pharmaceuticals, or we self-medicate with sugar, alcohol, nicotine, things like that. But that's like throwing dirt on top of the weeds. And so I wanted to figure out, how do you pull the weeds out at the root and replace them with flowers, with more empowering beliefs. And that's what I figured out. The one belief away method just means you're one belief away from having a huge breakthrough in your life. So if you have this belief in your mind that's in your unconscious mind, it's like having malware that you download onto your computer. You can tell your computer, come on, you can do this and run good and you're going to be okay, but it's just going to keep running the virus. You got to get in there and you've got to remove the virus, and then the computer will run optimally the way it was designed to. Our brains are the same way. We've downloaded these self-limiting beliefs, this mental malware, these limiting beliefs in our unconscious mind, our emotional mind. It's like the library of your brain that stores your beliefs, your habits, your values. And it's really controlling 95% of how we think, how we feel, and how we behave in life. And so I discovered that, one, how to upgrade that mental software, and two, how to do it very quickly.
Wow, that sounds amazing. What are the common signs or symptoms that someone is secretly sabotaged by their own internal scripts or their own internal beliefs?
So if we're talking about leadership, for example, then having trouble trusting people. All right, trusting your team. If every single decision has to come across your desk first, if someone's handling it on your team, but you get in there and you're micromanaging it, or you got to double check it because you have trust issues, that can really sabotage scalability. If you have imposter syndrome, right? If you start to feel like you're not worthy of leading, or you're not going to be able to handle the kind of pressure that's coming at you, then all of a sudden we can start to kind of just drop the ball or make mistakes, or we just start relying too much on alcohol or vaping or different ways that we try to cope with the pressure. If you feel like you are always on, I call it achiever syndrome. Yes. If you feel like you're the money guy, or you're the one who makes it happen, and this is your mojo, and you're not going to lose that momentum, right, by someone getting in your head, but you can't let go of you can't relax, right? Yeah. You can never relax. Everything feels like a fight. If you take your foot off the gas, even on a vacation, you feel like you're going to miss an opportunity, or things are all going to fall apart. So that's when you see the dysfunction that comes out that most leaders struggle with, especially when they're communicating with their teams.
Yeah, that's interesting. I do burnout recovery coaching with professionals. Mm-hmm. And one of the biggest issues is they cannot stop that loop in their brains, and they can't turn it off. The other piece, to your point, is this fear that if I'm not in total control, something is going to happen, and it's not going to be a good thing, right? So that's definitely, seeing that a lot in high performers, high achievers.
We run on the anxiety. We run on the adrenaline of it.
Yeah.
And being busy, you can relate to this, being busy, and having a million things going on keeps us feeling like we're doing something, and it makes us feel like we're in control and we're protecting something bad from happening. And when you're not busy, that's when all the insecurities come up. When it gets quiet, that's when all the fears and those worries of, it's going to fall apart. You're not as good as you think you are. What if they discover who you really are? You're going to run out of money. You're going to run out of time. Someone's going to blindside you, and there's nothing you're going to be able to do about it, and that is incredibly stressful.
Absolutely. And it's not good for your well-being, right? Your mental health, your emotional health, your physical health, all these things that we know chronic stress, causes internal inflammation, and it's just not, it never ends up being a good thing.
You're exactly right. 100%. Yeah. So, as they say, body keeps the score.
Yes, it always does. And it has a very accurate score. I mean, I think what we believe the score is not accurate at all, which is why we continue to move and move and move and move and never really take that break. So in your work, what is the single biggest misconception you hear about the one belief away method or high performance hypnosis?
So I think the biggest method when people start hearing the word hypnosis is they're like, oh, clucking like a chicken, or that trance stuff, or it looks silly, or it looks stupid. Or the fear is, you ain't going to get in my mind and mess up my mojo. This energy is what got me to where I am right now. And you're going to go in there and try to mess that up? I don't think so. But that's not the case at all. What I tell my super performers and my leaders is that you're like a high performing race car, but there's a parking brake set and you're not aware of it. All we're going to do is release the brakes so you can fly, right? But
Ooh.
people are so afraid that it's going to mess up their performance. It enhances their performance. The most successful people in the world have coaches, mind coaches, success coaches, Olympic athletes who are the best athletes in the world. They all got a coach,
Yeah.
right? Because it's going to make them better. So Jim Collins in his book, Good to Great, said what got you here won't get you there. And a lot of what's going to get you there isn't your sales skills, isn't your ability to plan. It's your beliefs, what you're really believing about yourself and also about the people that you work with. So if you're constantly at war, if you're constantly not trusting people, if you're constantly stressed, you can create a lot of success. In fact, I had a guy that ran $1 billion company. He said, success covers a lot of sins. So it was basically, he's like, I'm okay with collateral damage, right? Because look, what I've created. And I'm like, you know what? If you had a different belief system and you could actually trust yourself more and trust other people more and go through life with more peace instead of a heart at war, then imagine what you could take that from $1 billion to 4 billion, right? Because you could do it with your people instead of, feeling like he was the center of the universe.
Yeah.
So, we think that it's going to mess us up, but it actually is the key to the fulfillment and the freedom that we're all seeking to begin with. What's all the power for? So that we could ultimately feel peace.
The World Health Organization talks about workplace burnout, occupational burnout. And one of the things that they talk about is unmanaged stress produces lack of self-efficacy, where you stop believing in your own ability to do the job in front of you or to complete the task or to be able to even think rationally, right? And expand our brains to think about all the possibilities versus just looking at the problem. And I'm hearing the same thing, that's what you're saying, that our beliefs will guide that lack of self-efficacy as well.
Yes. So, what you had said is that stress makes us start doubting ourselves, but I really believe that beliefs is what causes the stress.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So I know we look at the external, we got more work than we feel like we could ever get done. In a company, it starts to feel like you're doing the work of 3 people now, right? There's always the fear that maybe you could get furloughed or laid off, or, there's all kinds of pressure that goes around when you feel like you're not in control of your livelihood. Okay. So that's going to create pressure. But if you have beliefs that say, I always land on my feet, if you have beliefs that say it always works out in the end, if it hasn't worked out yet, it just means it isn't the end. If you have a belief system that I have so much value that even though I'm stressed right now, I'm going to get through this. And if I get fired, someone else is going to pick me up quick because I'm an A player, then you don't have to go through life with all that stress. Buddha said that, life is suffering, but once you accept it, then it's not suffering anymore. It's just life.
Right.
Right. So that's why I talk about peaceful achievement. There's always going to be uncertainty, especially if you're a mover and a shaker, because you're always pushing the needle. You're always trying to grow. And with growth and expansion, as you're expanding your capacity, there's going to be more uncertainty. But inside, you have a belief system that knows that you can handle it. And so it's something that brings you joy. A lot of creators are joyful. They like to work. They like the chase. They like the hunt. They like because it makes them feel good. It's hitting all their emotional, unconscious needs.
Yeah.
But the pressure comes along because of the weeds that are in there as well. Every garden has weeds. And so if you can learn to pull those weeds, then you can feel more peaceful inside. Most people aren't doing that because they don't understand how this really works. They're watering the weeds and then complaining because they have so many of them.
Wow. Watering the weeds. I love that expression because I could see myself doing it, right? I'm watering all my insecurities. I'm nurturing it, and it's just growing and growing. And wow, that was great. I really like that analogy. So Tim, I've navigated complex organizations and boardrooms for many years, and I've seen how one person's unaddressed fear can derail an entire organizational culture. Can you share a story, or either personal or from a client, that illustrates the concept of the one belief away method in action? Like, what was the specific limiting belief, and what was the turning point for them?
So I was brought into this company, and the president of the company said that they were a team of mercenaries because they were 100% sales oriented, right? And they were all about trying to get that next sale, and very hungry and very determined, and they were growing, but they still felt like there was a lot of internal conflict. You know, sales managers competing, pitting their guys against each other, you know, instead of collaborating, right? It was an environment of competition, and there was just a lot of stress. And he thought they could do better and they could create, if there was a more positive atmosphere, but he wasn't sure. He was a really great leader, but he wasn't sure how to get his people there. And I went into his office and I noticed the door was always closed. There was no pictures of his family, even though he loved his family. You know, he grew up on a farm. His name was Troy. He was a really good family guy. But you wouldn't know it. Right. And as we got to know each other, he started sharing a little bit more of himself. And he said that when I grew up, I knew my parents loved me, but they didn't show it and they rarely said it. And so he was very uncomfortable giving compliments. And so he felt you didn't need it. You know, he didn't need it. And so nobody else needs it. And I had to help him understand that that's not the case, right? You know, you got to catch people doing things right. You got to love on them, LUV, listen, understand, validate, right? But people aren't, but they're not doing that. Usually they're just catching them when they're doing something wrong and then watering that weed. All right. So what you celebrate, you replicate. And so I was trying to help him understand the importance of, complimenting others, and for him to feel comfortable doing that for others, he had to do it for himself first. You can't give what you don't have. So I started getting him to compliment himself, and at first he felt really uncomfortable, right? But we had to get in there and we had to start upgrading those beliefs. And he started recognizing that, you know, being kind to the little boy inside of himself actually seemed like a good idea because he had a son, and so he imagined that it was like hugging his son or complimenting his son because he didn't have an issue complimenting his children. So, he didn't even recognize it as that. He thought he was just trying to love them and try to be a better dad to them than what he got, right? Which is what we do. Yeah. And so when he recognized that he could give that to himself as well, he started feeling more peaceful. And then he started, I remember one week I came in and the door to his office was completely removed. He said, we got an open door policy now. I'm like, yes, you do. He
went to the extreme.
He went to the extreme. He got all fired up about this. And then he had me train his whole leadership team. And then we rolled it out to all the employees. And we started building a new set of values where trust and compliments and collaboration were the new driving forces in life. You know, he got rid of his best salesman who was causing a lot of problems. You know, that's hard to do. But because he got rid of that one who was causing a lot of problems, all the other ones rose up, you know, and they went from 75 million to 125 million in 5 years with growth, right? And their EBITDA increased, all kinds of their, do I trust my leadership scores went from 43% to 95% or 96%.
Wow.
I remember the testing company called him and they're like, what's going on?
How'd you do this?
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And by the time I left that place, he had pictures of his family all over his office.
Nice.
Yeah.
I love that. You know, we do have to start with ourselves first and model the way. I think as leaders, we forget. And I just did a talk last week about, you know, the antiquated manager. We shouldn't be managing people anymore, right? It's about really bringing people in, training them with your applications, your systems, but letting them be innovative, right? What should we do differently, and really allowing people's curiosity and their expertise to shine through. So, you know, you're mirroring what I said last week but it's so true. It makes such a big difference.
Yeah, that's brilliant what you said. That's exactly right. And then try to become a belief hunter, right? So if you're going to lead people, you got to kind of understand where they're at. And so if you can understand not just what they're saying, but why they believe that, what's behind it, then all of a sudden you get a lot more clarity about what's going on instead of just feeling like they're being lazy or they're always complaining or they're always picking out the negative. You know, it could just be that they don't feel heard. or they don't feel valued, or they're not connecting the dot to where, how they're providing value. Maybe they're in a different department than sales, and they feel like the sales department are always the golden ones. They're the ones that get all the love, right? And
Yeah.
maybe they're in fulfillment, right, or marketing, and they don't feel like they're being appreciated. And so, or maybe they're just in the warehouse, and they don't feel like, they matter, the low people on the totem pole, and that's completely false. And
Yeah.
so by being able to understand what people are believing and then directly address that instead of all the symptoms, instead of all the content, you look at the context, right? What's the one domino that if you push that one over, it would knock all the other ones over? And that's why I believe that change can happen fast, and you can create a new change in behavior lightning quick. People who are struggling with sales, maybe they don't want to be pushy. I had a friend, I think of my clients as my friends, right? So one of my clients, Joe, he was struggling in sales, and he was having a really hard time closing the sale because he had a belief that if he asked for the sale, he might come across pushy or aggressive. And he had a father growing up that was very aggressive, and he didn't want to be like his dad.
Wow.
Now, I could have taught him all kinds of sales strategies and stuff, which I did after. But what I really did was I updated that belief first, helped him feel like he was more than enough, that he was worthy of asking for what he wanted, that he was fighting for his client, and that he should lean in because he's going to take care of him better than anybody else.
Wow.
And so we spent a couple of years really empowering him. And during the pandemic, he took really good care of his customers who weren't doing anything, but he was helped them feel safe the whole time. And when they opened back up after the pandemic, they all came to Joe, and he sold like $50 million worth of product and services
Wow.
in a 2-year period.
That's
He was
amazing.
calling me freaking out. It was a national company. They had to change their pay structure because they never had anything like that happen before.
Wow.
So the power of beliefs.
Yeah, what a transformation. What a transformation. That's amazing. If a listener is feeling overwhelmed today, what is the first, smallest practical step you recommend they take this week to identify a limiting belief?
So the first thing you can do is breathe. Just start breathing through your nose. Sit back in the chair, look up and breathe, and tell yourself that that's being productive. Because people think that when they stop and slow down, that they're wasting time and things aren't getting done. And that's false. You got to aim before you fire. Right? Most people don't even have a target.
Yeah.
They're just going. And so we got to make sure that we slow down. We breathe through our nose. Most people are breathing through their mouth. That causes more stress. Breathe through your nose. Look up. It activates the relaxation response. After about a minute, helps you feel more at ease. Then improve the questions you're asking yourself. Most people are asking lousy questions. What if it doesn't work out? Whose fault is this? Why don't things ever go right for me? You got to ask more empowering questions. What do I want to have happen? Who can I lean on for support? How can I make this more fun? And then, of course, you can go back to your 2 questions to help identify beliefs. So what would I have to believe to think the way I'm thinking, or to feel the way I'm feeling, or to behave the way that I'm behaving? What would I have to believe? And just keep asking that. The most common beliefs when you finally get down to it is I'm unsafe, I'll be rejected,
Yes.
why put all this effort in? It's not going to work out anyway. And then the worst one is I'm not good enough.
Not good enough.
I won't figure it out. And that's what drives all the other fears, is that I'm not enough. And because I'm not enough, I won't be loved. So I'm going to end up all alone and no one's going to care. And that's why we're always afraid of running out, because then there'll be nothing and we'll be nothing. Right? And that's a terrifying thought. So when we're having all this stress in our brain, sometimes it's because it feels like life or death.
Yeah.
So when you figure out what would I have to believe, well, I guess I'd have to believe that, it's not going to work out. It's always going to be this way and there's nothing I can do about it. That leads to depression. So then the second question becomes, what would I rather believe instead? Because beliefs are just opinions. And you can find the answer to any question or to any problem if you ask the right question. So if we ask, what would I rather believe instead? Well, I'd rather believe, and then you got to talk the way you want it. I'd rather believe that it's going to work out. People are always talking using negation, right? So they're always saying, well, I don't want this to happen and I don't want that to happen. But what do you want? Well, I don't want this and I don't want that. When you are working with the GPS on your phone, Dr. C, are you telling it all the places you don't want to go?
No.
You're
No.
telling it exactly where you want to go. And then it starts to take you there one step at a time. Even if you have no idea how to get there, it'll start taking you one step at a time. And if you make a wrong turn, it doesn't criticize you. It doesn't emotionally beat you up. It just says, make a U-turn over there. Mine says that to me all the time.
Yep.
Right. Yep. And then it recorrects to the shortest way to get you to the goal. If we could use our mind in the same way, we could achieve goals in half the time. But we're not focusing on what we want. We're focusing on what we don't want and what we're afraid of. And that's where all the stress is coming in. I mean, why would people feel stressed? Because they're afraid. Afraid of what? They're afraid of, whatever it is that they're focusing on, imagining, or telling themselves, which is the opposite of what they want and where they want to be.
Yeah. Oh, Tim, you're giving me homework.
That's my masterclass right there.
I got some homework to do. So, do I do that when I'm so ingrained in my fear?
Yes. So, great question. First, we're going to break apart some associations because you repeated a couple of times, I'm comfortable in my fear.
Yes.
And I want you to not be comfortable in your fear, because when you're afraid, are you really comfortable? No. What you're saying is that it's familiar and I know it, so it's my default and I go back there because it's familiar, but it's not comfortable. Our brain is always trying to avoid pain and gain pleasure. So if it actually feels comfortable being afraid, if it feels comfortable in chaos, if it feels comfortable not making decisions or not having clarity, then you're going to keep going to that like a default setting. And if that's not what you want, you got to tell yourself being in fear is awful. Being in fear is pain. Being in fear is robbing me of my goals and dreams. It's not allowing me to use the gifts that God put inside of me, right? Yeah. This is ripping me off.
Right.
Yeah. So what we got to do is we got to play to win, right? We got to play to win. And that means being a peaceful achiever. We're doing it not because we're trying to get away from anxiety or away from debt or away from disapproval. We're doing it so that we can expand and reach our fuller potential and learn how to go through uncomfortable situations more comfortably. So it's about growth. All right. So when I'm really stressed out and I'm really resisting and I'm really skeptical that this is going to work for me, what would I have to believe to feel that way? Okay. Now I might tell you to do the power breathing first or the power questions, but if you're resistant, you're like, I'm not going to do it. The breathing's not going to help. It would help. You're just not doing it. Why? Because your brain in an unconscious way is saying that if I do this, I'm going to let my guards down and I'm going to get hurt. I'm going to get blindsided again. And that's not acceptable. So I'm going to keep my guards up. I'm going to stay skeptical. I'm going to continue to call BS on you, even though it's really me creating this. So we just don't recognize it, that it's us. We keep feeling like it's happening to us. So what we do then is we got to ask ourselves, what do I have to believe? And then just keep doing it. And sometimes you can't see your own blind spots. That's why people come to you, so that you can help them recognize these blind spots. So you can help them notice what they're not noticing. That's why we need each other. I have coaches. I've had people for years that help me. I have coaches right now that are helping me because with my own blind spots. So if we can understand what that belief is, maybe I'm afraid to let go because I'm afraid that it'll all fall apart. And I have lots of experience that says that this is what's happened to me. So what I always say is, what if way back then you developed some beliefs and now you're just filtering every situation like that way? You're interpreting it that way. It doesn't necessarily mean that that's what went down. There's always a story we're telling ourselves. We go through life narrating every single situation. It's not what happens. It's what you tell yourself that determines how you feel. And so you have the ability to update your story anytime you want. Awesome. And it's easy to do if you know how, and it feels impossible when you don't.
Right. So, I think you've touched on it, but from your experience, 16,000 sessions, right? What is the biggest long-term transformation that you've seen in people that master their subconscious environment?
I think that they just have a lot more opportunities. I think everybody has opportunities around you all the time. I heard Bob Proctor once say that our brain is like a radio tuner, and the radio frequencies are around us all the time. So you can tune into country or jazz or, any kind of music that you like just by tuning into the right frequency. It's already there. You just got to tune into it. When people talk about manifesting, it's like they're taking something and they're bringing them to them. I think the opportunities are already right here. We just have to notice it. And our beliefs are what help us notice. And so if you have a belief that miracles are always happening, if you have a belief that breakthroughs are always happening, if you believe that you have so many opportunities that you couldn't go through them in a lifetime, then you're going to have a more of a sense of peace that you are going to have more chances for success, or you don't have to stress out that what if I make the wrong choice? Well, then you just make another choice, right? But we go through experiences that cause us to feel like, everything is life or death. And,
yes.
Like I said before, my anxiety that I used to have was like a fire alarm that was constantly going off, even though there was no fire. And so I had to learn how to disconnect that. Right now, I didn't want to get rid of it all the way because it was trying to help me, it was trying to protect me. And so I think we develop our instincts, but we don't want to be led by fear. We want to be led by faith and vision, especially as leaders.
Yeah. This has been amazing. Thank you for sharing your gifts and your expertise. But tell us, where can our listeners learn more about your work and get in touch with you specifically?
Well, I'm on all the social media channels. So if you do a search on Tim Shurr, Shurr, then you can find me there. My speaking website is timshurr.com. And so you can go and check out the resources there. And then I've written 7 books over the years. The last 2 were Get Out of Your Way and One Belief Away. And you can find those either on my website or you can get them from Amazon.
Tim, thank you so much for your expertise. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us. Really looking forward to reading your One Belief Away book.
Oh, such a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Today's conversation was a masterclass in mind gardening. The most powerful takeaway for me was a realization that so many of us are accidentally watering our weeds, focusing on our fears, instead of nurturing the flowers of our potential. Ooh, that hit me like a ton of bricks. As Tim reminded us, your brain is like a GPS. It doesn't care where you don't want to go. It only cares where you are currently focused. If you want to change your destination in your career and in your life, you have to update your internal coordinates. To start your own transition toward becoming a peaceful achiever, I highly recommend visiting timshurr.com. You can find his book, One Belief Away, and also access his free gift. The link will be in the show notes. Until next time, keep on learning, stay inspired, continue to flourish, and never stop evolving. I'm your host, Dr. C, and this is The Life Podcast.